again, morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. It's a universal greeting, Conrad. It
Yep.
works every single time. Welcome back to, I think I'm supposed to say ProQuest Stockholm now, even
Yep.
though it's still the Battle Hardened weekend.
Yesterday was Battle Hardened, today is Living Legend ProQuest.
Exactly. So yes, we are still casting our Living Legend games. We are still playing our rounds. Nothing too spectacular there, but we have had some really good games so far,
And
Conrad.
we've had some really good judge rulings as well, or judge questions as well.
Yes,
Because
there's a
since there is most cards are, many cards are old and has been played before, but
Mhm.
whatever new set, there comes new interactions, and some newer players hasn't had a chance to use these cards in Classic Constructed either. So they're
So yeah, it's like you're saying. There's a lot of weird rulings that have come up and a lot of complex issues. So we see a lot of judge calls, and I wonder if we're going to see more going into this first game. We have Uno Hansen, I believe from Finland, but I could be
no,
mistaken.
it's Norwegian, and
Norwegian.
I think we have the names mixed up right now. Oh no, wait, no, that's right. Pardon.
And
Uh,
so we have Uno playing Oldhim, a good old reliable. We have Andreas playing Icelander. So this is going to be a frosty matchup. And we see Andreas starting the game, just putting down an energy potion, arsenaling, and passing it to Uno, who is immediately pitching everything just to swing with his weapon. So this is going to be a slow matchup, I think, Conrad.
yes, and it's interesting to see already that we can see that there we have the new Olim is making good use of the new boots from Rosetta, well grounded.
Mhm.
So as soon as he has composed 4 cards, he can use them to prevent 2 damage from whatever source he would like. Very powerful new addition from our latest set.
Yeah, this is uh, th- again, Oldhim was just ever so slightly before my time, but from what I can tell, this is a very classic Oldhim fatigue deck. Seeing the crown of seeds,
Yeah.
just blocking anything that prevents damage
Uh,
is what he wants to be doing.
and like we saw right there, he immediately pitches for Crown of Siege to stack something at the bottom of his deck and draw another card. So,
Exactly.
and LSS decided that we want to create a lot of new ice cards and earth cards, or rather earth cards from Rosetta. And there is no way we can let people have both Crown of Seeds and a new power injection of all the powerful earth cards from Rosetta. So they preemptively banned Crown of Seeds from Classic Constructed. Because as we can see here, the effect doesn't seem that insane at first glance, maybe, because you can, anytime you like, as an instant, you can put your arsenal card at the bottom of a library and prevent the card and draw a card. But what this means is that you can, for a resource, you can cycle a card. So you can set up a really good pitch stack for the other way around. And there is also a very powerful effect to be able to prevent 1 damage at will. And since I'm pretty sure Uno is playing Counter Blessings as well, because it goes really well into this kind of deck. Because in this very matchup, he's using the Arcane Lantern in one hand and the Winter's Veil in the other. But it's very common to use what was it called? Something Shield of the Ram's Head.
Rampart of Ram's Hat.
Yeah,
Yes.
as an arm piece as well. So there are places where you can put your resources. You can either use it to sync with Crown of Seeds and cycle a card and prevent 1 damage, or you can buff your shield by 1. So there are always things to do with your resources in addition to play counter blessings.
So it's kind of interesting to see that because we know this was going to be a fatigue match. We know that Ultim is going to be looking to like block and just survive. But it's interesting to see just how defensive a deck can be. Because like you said, we see the well-grounded, the Earth Boots from Rosetta that can prevent the arcane damage. We see him pitching. We see him playing the Count Your Blessings. He's essentially not even interested in killing his opponent that much. He's just interested in getting as much hit points and defenses and block as he possibly can,
Yep.
staying alive as long as it takes until Andreas doesn't have any cards left.
And it depends on what build Andreas is running, because there are Iceland builds that uses I think it's called Amulet of Frost, an aura that at end of turn damages your opponent for how many frostbite counters you have on you. And once you start stacking up on those auras, the damage can scale exponentially. You get more and more damage, and it's harder to get rid of all those frostbites at one. So Uno probably understanding this and understands that he has to conserve life as much as possible in addition to playing Count Your Blessings. So we're thankful already that the players are doing their best to play at a reasonable pace, because this might be a long one.
Yes, especially if you're playing Fatigue Oldhim, you know that like you only get to make a couple of decisions in the game. You're really just blocking out and trying to survive. Obviously, it's also decisions, but
Yep.
because you only really have a couple of turns where you really need to think about what you're doing, you need to reserve time for those turns. And any other turns, you just need to like block out Arcane Barrier, absorb. And on the opposite side, we have an Icelander player. Who are also no strangers to the game going to draw if they play slowly as well. So it's not strange that both of these players are immediately playing so quickly and going turn to turn very quickly, because very little is happening, and they are both very aware of what they need to do to see this game through to its end and not have it end in a draw. So we see Icelander taking a moment actually to deliberate. Mostly because I think, yeah, there it is. We see the Spirit of Yendal coming in, the one that when it attacks your defense, you will gain 1 life if you are lower life total than your opponent.
Yeah, and that's easy done when you're Icelander, because you start with lower life than most other heroes. I think it's just Kano and New Prism. That's start with life beyond below 36.
Yeah.
There's not many. At least Olim is one of them who he starts at 40 as most of the heroes.
But we see them going through it quite quickly. We see Uno actually losing a little bit of life there on his ultim and then quickly healing it back up, playing those Count Your Blessings, and then once again just swinging the weapon, threatening a frostbite.
Yes.
And I guess the weapon is an interesting part of the puzzle. It's interesting to talk about as well for a moment, because it comes in for 4, and if you pitch an ice card to it, which you probably will be doing in Ultim because you're going to be playing so many ice cards, then it threatens the frostbite on hit, which will disrupt your opponent's turn. And since it comes for 4, most cards that block for 3, so you do then give them the frostbite, which makes it so much harder for them to take a turn that goes over your defenses.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. If this weapon would have been 3 power, it wouldn't be nearly as powerful as it is right now. And I guess that's the big reason for it being banned in Classic Constructed. It was simply too good for what it did.
Was it not? No, it's not Oldhim's weapon.
I think it was banned. I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it was banned before Oldhim LL'd.
All right. Yes, that was shortly before I started, but I
Yeah.
will take your word for it, Conrad. Either way, currently not playable in Classic Constructed. So I think a lot of people are glad that it's not coming back with the Jarl deck, who is able to play this weapon, or would be.
Yeah, Jarl gets its own weapon, which is powerful in its own right, but I don't think we wouldn't need this Winter's Veil back in Classic. I'm fine without it.
One person who may not be is Uno, who is currently once again thinking about his next move.
That's interesting that while we were talking, Uno resolved his attack, and in the meantime, Andreas responded by doing his thing, playing Icelander instants. Like I think he gave Uno a couple of frostbites and presented some kind of arcane damage, which I missed because we were busy talking about whether Winter's Veil is legal or not, were legal or not in the same time as while Oldhim LL'd. But it's a unique thing with Iceland. I say, like, apart from maybe Kano, Iceland is pretty much the only hero that functions almost as much on your opponent's turn as she does on her own. Because her hero power makes it so that you're allowed to play blue card, non-attack action cards from your arsenal during your opponent's turn.
Yeah, so you're trying to get cards in arsenal that you want to play on your opponent's turn, like stuff like the Arctic Incarceration that we see pitched, or even Winter's Bite, anything that makes your opponent discard or have to pay extra, because then they have to pitch cards and they will not be able to play with them.
And it's a very, as you say, it's very powerful to have in combination with ice cards, because they would land your opponent on frostbite in addition to whatever effect the cards in themselves have.
Yes, it's funny how those teams sort of line up, because I'm thinking you say it's powerful in ice cards, and it's like, you're right, because if we had this effect for earth cards for Verdance, she wouldn't even want it, because her hero ability doesn't work on the opponent's turn. You could just heal on their turn, but what do you care?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It seems like Andreas chosen to go with Easter egg for go again.
Yes, definitely.
Playing out another E-pot.
Fast plays being made, deciding to block most of the damage, but he's letting a surprising amount of damage through keeping a surprising amount of hands. I think he is trying to make sure he at least can get those decomposers of to get 4 cards in his banish zone, so he can at least get his boots online.
Yeah, it might have been. I guess it depending on the Icelander build, how many attacks you run, because there could be a scenario where Uno would have a hard time decomposing, because if Andreas doesn't present any physical attacks, he wouldn't be able to block and get cards in his graveyard, because it takes so much more time to. If Uno had to spend his turn to send, for example, an Autumn's Touch, it's he presents some kind of damage, but it's not very efficient use of your resources.
Exactly.
I mean, he much rather just block whatever he can, send the hammer, and when he has enough card in his graveyard, he can use them to decompose powerful cards like Plow Under and Felling of the Crown.
And I'm not sure, because the game has been going so quickly, I haven't had a good chance to keep track of Uno's graveyard specifically, but he did play that Summer's Fall on his last turn, the red Summer's Fall that he attacked with, and there are no cards in his banish zone, so either he chose not to decompose, or he was not able to, but it looked like his graveyard was filled enough for him to be able to do that, so I'm not entirely sure which of the two it was, because if it was a conscious choice, that would indicate that Uno is trying to do something very different than what we're thinking of, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're about to find out, but I would imagine he want to decompose as soon as possible. Unless, this might be, of course, if he knows that there might be risk of him running out of cards to decompose in his graveyard, maybe he much rather save the decompose for a card that actually cares about it, because that what's it called? Summer's Fall. It would target an aura that could be useful against some things, for example, like a frostbite, not the frostbite tokens, because they would disappear when you pay for the attack anyway.
But a channel like Frigid, for example.
Yeah, for example. So it might be that he wants to save his decompose for useful cards like Felling and Plow Under, or for that matter, Summer's Fall, whenever he has a target for it. And here we see Andreas is using a couple of big, strong, powerful, efficient attacks, like the card he's attacking with right now is Wounded Bull, which is a 3 for 7 to begin with, but if you have less life than the opponent, it goes up to 8 power. And I think it was Michael Hamilton who was the first. He popularized this deck, and it was even named after him, called Bullander, when he used a combination of very efficient big physical attacks and the ability to arsenal powerful blue cards. He has all the good stuff from the usual Icelander, but in combination with big physical attacks, things get so much harder for the opponent to decide if they want to spend their resources to Arcane Barrier, but if they do, they don't have as much equipment, and cards are well equipped to deal with big physical attacks. For example, like a D-React is awful to pitch to a Arcane Barrier, but it's very efficient to block, for example, a Wounded Bull.
And so begins a very interesting match, because that may well be the reason that Uno has chosen to block little enough to go down to the 28 hit points he is now, because now he is below Andreas in health, which means that when Andreas is playing cards like Wounded Bull, they will not get that benefit. So there is an argument to be made for being below your opponent's hit points, but then on the other hand, he is going to, if he gets to keep hands at all, he's going to want to swing the hammer, because he does need to at some point kill Andreas, and Andreas can then easily say like, oh yeah, I am just going to take that damage. Especially because Uno is also playing Counter Blessing, so he will at some point end up above Icelander in life again. So, and then you get a very different style of game, because usually both players are just trying to kill their opponent, but now we get this very different kind of like playing with life totals type of game. I had one game like this in an earlier point where I was playing against Verdance, and I was playing against a Viserai who was using the Reaping Blade, where you cannot heal if your life is higher than theirs. So I was trying to kill them, but I was simultaneously trying to be on enough lower, like I needed to have enough lower life that I could execute my combo, which relies on a lot of healing, and that is a very hard puzzle to crack.
Makes it really hard to balance. How low can I go?
Exactly.
And here we see what we were talking about earlier. Here's another Summer's Fall, and this time there is a target for it. So Uno is choosing to decompose this time around. getting rid of that frost hex that the Andreas just played.
Exactly.
So right now it's in the bottom of Andreas' deck, and still presenting an attack for 6. But I think this is the first decompose we've seen in this game, right? So there should be...
Yes, because we saw the earlier Summer's Fall, but he chose not to decompose on that. He also did not have an aura target at all for it. But it's likely what you were saying. I think Uno expects his game to go long enough that he's not worried about being able to activate his boots. He's not looking to activate them as quickly as he can. They'll get their use in due time.
Yeah. Oh, there's another frost hex. And since Andreas played at the end of turn, would give Uno a frostbite, which damaged him by 1. And I'm curious, so we've seen 2 frost hexes from Andreas, and if he were to find a third one at this point, I think the damage will start adding up a lot.
Yes, and I see very much what you mean now, because it looks like those frost hexes stick around. They're not going to disappear unless Uno makes them disappear, which is what he needs to rely on his Summer's Falls for. Which is also why Andreas is playing these frost hexes out now. He's choosing a smart moment, because we've seen, I think that we saw 2 Summer's Fall being pitched. We saw the one being played earlier, and we saw one playing now. So we have 4 out of maximum 9, but most likely 6 Summer Falls that Uno is playing in the deck.
Yep.
Sort of already being out of the way. So Andreas is like, hey, if you're getting rid of the one thing that deals with this, then I'm going to do this.
Yeah, I guess there are other fringe cards, but they, like, what's it called? Imperial Warhorn, for example, probably isn't played in this matchup.
Yeah, I think this has me sort of raking my mind, because I'm kind of wondering as like what cards deal with aura as well.
Rune Blades, and we have seen a couple of Rune Blade cards and Shadow cards earlier today, but I can't think of any that the Guardians has access to. Well, there are generic ones, but I don't think, I am not sure whether they can target, like pick to pieces, what's it called? Through the facade is one.
Through the facade cannot be blocked by auras. That is the attack.
But it's still on hit, right?
I don't believe so.
Cut through the facade.
I think it can simply just not be blocked.
Yeah, when you hit this hits here, you may destroy an aura they control.
Oh, it does have the on.
And that doesn't unfortunately that doesn't work on his frost hex though, because I think technically the aura is under Uno's control, but it's just a bad aura to have under your control because it damages you.
I think you were right. Yes, because it says on the text on the card, an affliction enters the arena under an opponent's control. So that's his own aura now. So he has to have some different way of dealing with it.
Yeah,
I know.
And we see also Uno making good use of the Crown of Seeds, just hiding the cards from Command and Conquer, cycling it. He does have to pay a resource though, but he's not losing the card from his library. Oh, look at this. Uno found another Summer's Fall, a blue one. It's less damage, but it's still, he's very happy to get rid of that frost hex.
Yes, he's still dealing with a Channel Lake Frigid as well. That's kind of just sitting there. Or no, that is his own Channel Lake Frigid, isn't it? Yes, yep. Exactly. So that's making it harder for Andreas too. So that might come in clutch a little bit in making it harder for Andreas to play those frost hexes out.
Yeah, and we see also why the Channel Lake can be so annoying, because it makes so that Andreas has to pay 1 to use his defense reaction.
Yes, exactly. It makes it's in a weird way almost. No, not almost, but a lot of defense reactions that cost 1 or 2 energy. Yep. So at that point, you need to pay anyway. So then if you have to pay 3, it usually doesn't matter. You're still just going to pitch a blue.
Yep.
But the ones that are free, like the Sync Belows that so many decks rely on, suddenly those become very bad, because now you're blocking 2 card 4 instead of
big difference between one resource or 0 resources to do anything.
It is a very different kind of breakpoint, but a very important one nonetheless. We see Andreas using the Coronet Peak here, the headpiece that forces your opponent to discard a card or pay an energy.
Yeah, I mean, that has got to be some kind of bad hand for Andreas if he chooses to use the Coronet Peak, because they are so Una has so simple outs of ways of using resource. He can just, yeah, he can either play Count Your Blessings, or he can just use Crown of Seas to cycle a card in his arsenal. So there is like pretty much no punishment at all from the crown. It's a lot more uses if your opponent's on a full red line deck.
And we're also seeing that the game is by no means over, but we're seeing things going sliding slightly away from Andreas, because it is with all of the Count Your Blessings, Ultim is going to have so much life that it is kind of on Andreas to present enough damage to actually kill him, and she just used some of her major cards that might work towards that end with the Frost Hexes in order to get that done, but Ultim is at 33.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure how. It would be interesting to see how much life Andreas could spare. Oh, here's the third Frost Hex. I mean, this is the third one, and the other two are at the bottom of Andreas' deck. So let's just say that Una can't fight another Summer's Fall. So this Frost Hex will stay in play. There will still be a long time before we get deep enough in the decks so that Andreas gets to see his other two Frost Hexes. So I'm curious about how much damage Andreas can present while not using up all his cards, because old him has attacks. At the very least, he has this very, very powerful hammer. Attacking for 4, he has pitch a blue, attack for 4 with the Winter's Wail. And in addition, if you pitch a ice card, there's a frostbite on hit. That's annoying enough. But it's also 4 damage, and if you want to block it, you have to spend cards from your hand, which in turn is cards that won't go back in your deck through your pitch. So I think and that's where the fatigue plan comes in. Oldhim making such good use of every card he has. He can pitch stuff to get it back into his library, but also having effects out of it. And by playing Count Your Blessings, he gets more life back than the cards would be worth if he was blocking with them.
And that makes sense. It's always the sort of stealth, sneaky downside to Wizards. Because when I started playing the game and I was learning what Gaynor did, I was always wondering, like, yeah, I guess I understand why people play him as a combo deck that kills their opponent in one go, but
yep.
Why do you have to do that? Why can I not just ping my opponent with some arcane damage each turn? Well, the reason for that is that your opponent is just going to pitch a card to Arcane Barrier every turn, and then after 20 turns, you are going to be out of cards and your opponent is not.
Exactly. I think it was a grim realization once you were fatigued for your first time meeting Oldhim. For example, I said, wow, I thought I had this. He was just defending. Here comes the judge call. I get that fixed.
Oh, we immediately have a judge call. It's as we have been saying before, there are a lot of these judge calls happening, and it's not strange. Living Legend is a very nuanced, complex format with a lot of stuff going on. And especially when it comes to Icelander and Uno as well, Icelander has ways to play things on their opponent's turn, and then there is the Frostbites that come in that's required to be paid, but you can also play instants in response to those Frostbites being created. So there's a lot of layers of play to it, and that could very quickly lead to like some complex questions about what is actually going on. It's either going to be something like that, or it is going to be a very straightforward thing where a player missed the trigger and they were just, oh, I forgot, and then the judge is called to sort of resolve the situation in the correct manner. But it's very interesting to sort of see that we are definitely getting more judge calls in Living Legends than we were in Classic Constructed, but not all of them have to be because of the complexity of the game. Some of them have been, but sometimes someone just forgets something. It's what happens. We're all humans. It's easy for it to happen. Looks like our players are discussing with the judge right now. Did you hear
I didn't catch what the call was about. But yes, we haven't. There has been an aura in play for a while now, which we haven't pointed out. On Andreas' side is Insidious Chill, and I think that's a very important card for him, because here's another important one. But Insidious Chill is an aura that enters the play with 3
frost counters.
And what the the beautiful thing is that whenever you ice fuse, you can remove a frost counter from chill, and if you do, target hero has to discard a card unless they pay 2. So what he can do, if he can stack up on auras, he can make it so that if he has multiple frost hexes in play, he can use some kind of ice fuse alongside Insidious Shield to try to empty your opponent's hand, because he can stack it so that the opponent has to discard first and then choose if they want to take arcane damage from, for example, an Aether Vein, which is a card that I just get a fixed as well. It's a very good ice fuse card, so makes it that if you get damaged by it, you have to discard a card unless you pay 2. So if you can stack multiple effects of Frostbite creations, damage sources, and discard effects, your opponent will have a very tough time dealing with everything at once. And that's where the beauty of frost hexes come in as well, because if there are multiple frost hexes in game, they would take damage from every instance of Frostbite. And since they have no cards in hand, they will have a hard time defending from either damage or arcane, or either
physical or arcane damage.
Physical arcane and frost hex arcane.
Yes, no, I see where you're going. It looks like the judge call was resolved. I think it was a missed trigger perhaps on the Channel Lake Frigid.
That's it. Yep.
Causing that to be. It looks like the call was made that is going to go to graveyard at the end of the turn. So Andreas drawing back up. The Insidious still is obviously still there. An interesting card now that you mention it. One that I hope to play maybe as a one-off in my Jarl deck. The art is too pretty for me not to, but I probably shouldn't.
It's really nice.
So we see another Plow Under, and Uno is once again, it looks like, playing a Plow Under without decomposing. And maybe we are not getting the full view, but I believe that he has not yet decomposed 4 Earth cards to his banished zone, because I think there are 4 cards there right now, and one of them is an Ice card. So if he then plays the Plow Under without decomposing, that is coming in for a mere 2 damage. But I feel like it must be that there are 4 cards, and that we're not seeing it correctly from here, because playing a card for 2 damage does not seem like a wise play. In that case, it would be the obvious choice would be for Uno to just swing his hammer.
Yep, absolutely. Unless he just wants to get rid of the card in his deck. If he's so far into the fatigue plan that like my attack doesn't matter, I only have to get rid of cards in my deck. That this Plow Under is a yellow card. It might be in the way for the turn when I really need it. Because let's say if he can get rid of every yellow and red card in his deck, he would have a stack of all blues, which would be great at paying for frostbites, arcane damage, and that would be like the only counter, the best counter for.
But it is.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it looks like we were seeing it wrong, because we saw our Icelander go from 24 to 21 health and blocking only 3. So they are active. It looks like Uno has activated this for bills. And we now see the play that you were talking about. We see the Aether Ice Vein coming out. We see the Ice Fuse, and we see the counter being removed from the Insidious Chill.
Yeah, chosen to pay for it. And then preventing 3, taking 2. I'm paying 2 more for the discard effect.
Yeah. And I think especially in this situation as well, we were talking about it earlier about how Wizards can just sort of get fatigued, and Oldhim is already a deck that is looking to fatigue, but Oldhim, more than any hero, is happy to pitch cards to AB, because that's cards he doesn't have to block with, so he's not thinning his deck at all. And that is his win condition, to have a thicker deck than you do. And his deck is never going to be thinner than Icelander at this point.
Yep.
So we see him coming in with a Felling of the Crown this time. Again, not decomposing, or is he? No, it looks like he's
considering it.
Yeah.
Yep, there we are.
Yeah, so I guess Uno has sort of seen that, like, yeah, I am on the fatigue plan, but if I can just swing with a Felling and I have enough cards and I can decompose, I'm just going to try and deal enough damage. Eventually, she'll have to start blocking or die.
And it seems to like Andreas deciding that I can't go on like this. I can't use my much needed cards to block. I have to go for offense and hope that I can present enough Frostbite disruption or arcane damage so that Oldhim has to do something. He can't let Oldhim keep him attacking him, unfortunately.
But it is also a very tall hill for him
It
to
will be a
climb,
tall order,
because
absolutely.
he is 17 hit points behind now, and we've seen 17 hit points behind. We've seen games yesterday as well where we had people being 17 hit points behind as an aggro deck,
Yeah.
and then make a good on that gap and still win. But if you're 17 hit points behind against Oldhim,
Yeah, exactly.
oh boy.
You remember our first game today was on OG Prism versus Shane.
Exactly.
There was a 16 life deficit, but that went well for the Shane after all. But this is a total different ball game. Prism doesn't have, for example, I think there are 3 counter blessings left in Uno's deck.
He's probably playing all 9 of them because they are not
Absolutely.
living legends.
The question is how many has he played? I think we're up to 5, maybe 6 played. So that leaves at least 3 or 4 to go. So that's a lot of life still waiting to be gained. And here we can see one of those great new additions from Rosetta, Felling on the Crown. That's just such an efficient card. It's a 3 for 8.
Yes,
at this
Felling on
point.
the Crown is honestly one of my own personal favorites. Being a Earth enjoyer myself, as it is a card that feels so fair while still being really strong. Like being able to just
Incredibly strong.
present 8 damage is very strong, and being able to disrupt your opponent for 1 card is also strong.
Yeah,
but in order to do that, you need some setup. It could only come for 4, and pitching a blue to attack with a card for 4 damage is horrendous. So early game, this card is quite bad.
But it has this it's really powerful that you don't even get the choice if you want to put a card on bottom. It's not like an on-hit effect, bottom a card. You just do it to begin with, then you might block.
And then the fact that it then comes for 8 means that, especially against decks that don't block well, you need to be really careful with what you put away, because now you still need to block 8 damage after you've bottomed that card. So if you don't want to give your entire hand to block that, you're probably going to be leaking a little bit of damage too.
Yep. And we see here also Andreas using another Aetherized Vein with some damage leaking through and making you discard a card. Yeah, but he decides to discard another counter blessings so that the effect will be there. He will get the bonus for his next counter blessings.
Exactly. So we see Uno dropping in hit point total a little bit, but he's content to do that, knowing that the counter blessings is going to be there. He's going to be going up. So Andreas is just trying to present as much damage as he possibly can while staring down the sword. He places down the channel Lake Frigid, and he wants to go for that Waning Moon strike as well before he is affected by the Frostbite of the attack that might hit. It looks like he's blocking it out anyway.
Yeah.
But the channel Lake Frigid is there now, and it's going to stay there as well, because there is... Well, is it going to stay there actually? Because now it is his turn, so that card...
If he has... Yeah.
Okay, he has an ice card to pitch. So he's just going to use the Coronet Peak, and he's going to hope that the effect of the Coronet forcing Oldhim to discard a card together with the channel is enough to keep him at bay. And
he's chosen to discard.
Ooh, interesting.
Wow.
He's trying to thin some cards out of his deck then, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to get rid of... Ripple Away is not a good card per se, but it's still a blue card.
But there is the Summer's Fall again, and that's going to be bottoming that
Frost Tax.
Yeah, probably the Frost Tax. Actually, I was thinking about the channel Lake Frigid, but you are right. It's going to be bottoming the Frost Tax, and that kind of takes a lot of the little bit of threat that Andreas still had left away from him, and it is possible to sort of stop an Oldhim from attacking you too hard, because he is focused. His deck is built around blocking out and defending. But if you're at 5 life, he's happy to just swing the mace for 4. But if you give him a blue and a Felling of the Crown, he's also happy to swing at you for 8. At that point, you need to block or you are dying.
Yeah, and this is not where you want to be as an Icelander either. It's just using his ice card for Coronet Peak. That's not an issue for Uno. Uno has all the cards he wants. He has chosen to discard another Felling Crown. Oh, this is another classic.
Drone of
Brutality. I think we saw it before. I don't remember. It might have been... Was that banned like in every format pretty much on print? I think it was before our time.
There was a brief moment where it wasn't banned, or I think maybe it got banned and then unbanned. Because I remember I opened that, I think in Outsiders or something around that time. It must have been because I don't think it was a card that was printed in Outsiders, but
No.
I remember opening it and being like, oh, this seems like a good one-off to have in your deck, and most deck lists then recommended it for me as well. So there was a period where maybe it wasn't banned in Blitz or only in Blitz.
I know it has been legal in Blitz recently, but it's decided to take it away anyway.
But as we see it, it's demanding the blocks from Andreas,
Yeah.
and because of the text on the card, drone essentially means that it's a card that cannot be fatigued-ish. There
Yeah.
are obviously, if you are made to discard it in some way, sure.
Yeah.
Well, even then, it says if it would be put into the graveyard from anywhere, you put it on the bottom of the deck.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be there. So if you have a blue drone and a red drone, you can essentially just pitch the blue to the red forever.
Yeah, and I think there was an issue as well with the possibility of an infinite stalemate. If one player had a drone of brutality and a card to pitch, and the other player had at least 3 drones, it would mean that they could attack and block forever, and no one would be able to get through.
I remember where I saw it now as well, because that was when I was playing my Riptide, and some of the Riptide lists, they were trying to fatigue, but you cannot fatigue with a bow because you cannot attack, so you played the one copy of drone to be able to actually finish the game.
Instead of a real weapon, you had a drone.
Exactly. But we see, we see the game moving towards its closing stages in all likelihood. We see Uno.
Uno has another Summer's Fall for the Frost Hex.
Yes, he is. He's trying. He's getting rid of even the little bits of threat that Andreas has left, and don't forget he's got those counter blessings stacked, and he has more of them left. It looks like he is on 22 hit points, but if Andreas cannot kill him within the next 2-3 turns, he essentially effectively may be more closer to 35, 36, 37 hit points instead.
It's a lot more. So this is so awful because now he also not only does he have to, Andreas has to deal with the fatigue threat. He has to get through at least, let's say 35 damage, something like that. And he also has to get to not die to like every single attack. Like the hammer that can come every turn for every blue is 4 attacks. It is 4 damage. And apart from that, I know Uno also has other cards like red attack, Feather on the Crown is still there. Plow Under might still be there. Like big chunks that demands at least 2 or even 3 cards for Andreas to block.
And even if Andreas were somehow, in some way, managed to get Uno to the point where they can win, Uno has some cards that block. He does have those boots active. He can prevent 2 damage. He does have a Heart of Ice. It can block a damage as well. He can prevent damage with the Crown of Seeds. He has so many ways to stay alive, and staying alive is exactly what the old man is doing in this situation, which is probably why he grew to be so old.
Yeah.
So we see Andreas at this point probably realizing the position they're in is not looking good, but trying to make the most of their run, trying to see, like, who knows what hand you get, who knows, my opponent might be doing something strange, they might have a deck that plays cards that break their hand, maybe I can find some way back into the game. My opponent is only on 19 right now. There is another Frost Hex, that is exactly what Icelander needs to have a chance at staying in this game. She does also have the 2 energy potions down, so even if she's forced to block with cards, she can use those to create energy. And we see Icelander desperately trying and succeeding to a very small degree at least to put some more pressure on Oldhim.
Yeah. I'm trying to piece together in my head what kind of hand Andreas would need to try clawing back into this.
I think mostly what Andreas needs is for Uno not to draw any of his counter blessings.
And just no counter blessings, no attacks, no swing with hammer. Let's begin with that.
Yes.
And what else there will be? There has to be multiple Frost Hexes.
We are on the second cycle for Andreas, so if he was pitching things, if he had a plan from the get-go, he might be drawing into a hand that he's pitched deck before, but
yeah, the issue being he doesn't have life sources. The life source has to take some damage to keep his hand.
But as long as it's just a hammer,
Yeah,
can potentially take the 4. It will give him a frostbite, but he does have 2 energy potions that he can crack to get
yeah,
around that. So he has one turn of not blocking and being able to play out a big hand.
yeah, and he has some extra reach in the form of Storm Striders.
This may be it now, because we're seeing the 1 block, just 1 card blocking. So blocking 3, taking 1 damage, going on to 4, and the frostbite.
Ah, okay, it was
Yeah.
saving a card.
He's just arsenaling. So this is, I think he is setting up for one final power turn where he's hoping to say no blocks. Problem then being that now if he says no blocks, he dies.
Yep, yep, yep.
He does play out another energy potion.
Ooh, that's an Oakenhold.
Oh, and that is not what you want to see if you are Andreas in this situation. So Oakenhold needs to be, ideally, needs to be fused with an Earth card and an Ice card. But if you manage to do that, it will get Dominate, and it's coming in for a whopping 9.
Nine.
So the question now is, can Andreas possibly even stay alive against that? If it hits, Andreas has to discard cards, but that part is the least of his worries right now.
I, he did play energy pot from Arsenal.
Yes, Andreas is trying to puzzle because he can obviously block with 1 card from hand from 3, but then he's still taking he's taking 5 damage, so then he's still dead, but he can block with Tunic, then he's taking 4 damage, and he's still dead. So
we haven't seen any like immovables or Oasis Respite, anything.
yes, he's looking for most likely less a way to stay alive and some way to crack the Storm Striders and deal as much damage as he can to hold him to maybe try and kill him, but like he has to go through the Heart of Ice,
No, that's
and
it.
there he is. There is the good game. We see
Yeah.
Andreas Björnsson on Icelander taking the game over Oldhim, the fatigue style.
No, the other way around. Olim taking the game. Yep.
I'm saying it wrong. I was
Yep.
so focused on our Icelander, but
Yep.
you are correct. We have Uno Hansen, our Oldhim player, bringing back the old man, bringing back the Frost to this living legend, and managing to beat out a different kind of Frost. That didn't really plan out the way I wanted it to. You know,
Yeah.
sometimes you miss all the shots you don't take, Conrad.
No, but it's. I think this is interesting to see watch Oldhim in action, because it's a very synergistic deck in a sense that they don't do. Correct me if you don't agree here. They don't do anything particularly fancy. It's not like this insane go wide turn, for example, like we could see from Shane earlier, like or Aurora. It's very not really, maybe not down to earth, but it's a very controlling, slow controlling style, making very good use of all of your cards. Any blue card can be cycle 1 card from a Crown of Seeds, pay for your shield or pay for counter blessing. So there are so many good uses, and like
I think I do agree with you. It's you are correct. Like but this is the flavor of the game sort of oozing through in the gameplay mechanics again. Like Oldhim he's not there to do anything fancy. He just has his hammer, and you cannot wear him down. He's just going to be there forever, like an icy statue.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that when Oldhim got to Living Legend, of course it was a strong deck. It wouldn't have happened otherwise, and I'm sure people could be. There are always 2 camps. One of the Oldhim players who are like, wow, this hero is so awesome, I get to control stuff. And then there's other guys who's like, oh, I hate Oldhim, he's so oppressive, I can't do what I want, it's hard to get through. But he's just so, what do you call it? Not stable. Consistency. That's the word I'm looking for. Because he will do the same thing, and I don't think if you just pick 4 random cards of an Oldhim deck and give it to him, unless there are 4 reds, yeah, if he only has 1 blue, he will put together an okay turn. Maybe not fancy, but he will do something annoying. He will threaten cards from your hand, some kind of damage, or make a frostbite.
It makes sense to me. It reminds me a little bit of discussions you see sometimes online when it comes to online competitive games, where you have games where you can stun an enemy, and there's always people being like, oh, I hate being stunned, and there's always people being like, oh, I love doing the stunning because I feel so powerful. Trying to balance those 2 things together as a game designer is one of the toughest aspects.
Yeah, and I would guess the stun effect is needed in many games, because if some heroes would be allowed to do whatever they like without disruption, they would be insane.
Exactly. Like
Like an unopposed, say not Fi might be a bad example, but say,
even just an Aurora or
yeah,
something like that.
Aurora, Sen, Shane is harder to disrupt, but there are so many heroes that if you don't do anything about their game plan, they will beat you because you won't be able to block them
Exactly.
out.
Which is, to circle it back a little bit, I mentioned earlier that Felling is one of my favorite new cards, and this is exactly why, because it's something that you kind of just want to play as a normal, just good value attack in Earth decks
Yep.
anyway, and it also has that disruption tied onto it.
Yep.
So now I don't automatically have to automatically lose against aggro anymore when I'm trying to play janky weird decks
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I'm doing my own plan.
And
But
I'm sure like both Oldhim and Starvo are very thankful for good new infusion of Earth and Ice cards,
yes,
because
yes.
they've been stuck with cards like not Summer's Fall, Autumn's Touch,
Mm-hmm.
which is like a vanilla attack for 5, 6, or 7. We can block 3. It's good, but it's not nearly as powerful as the effect of Felling of the Crown, for example, or Plow Under. To me,
No, I definitely agree, and I think this will, in the long run, also undoubtedly impact the Living Legend format, because one of the reasons people still play Autumn's Touch is because it is one of those few Earth cards that blocks 3. But now we
yep.
have Plow Under, now we have Felling. Who knows what we're going to get 1 year, 2 year, 5 years from now? So eventually, Living Legends is going to go sky high with these
Yep.
types of things. But I think that's it for our current session. We should have another, I believe, one more group stage match,
Yeah.
and then I think we are down to top 8 after that.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
So yes, so when we go live next, which should be in 10 to 30 minutes, you are not going to see me. I'm going to be replaced by Peter, but you will see Peter and
I'll be
Conrad
here.
talking about the next game. So we'll stay tuned, and we will see what we have got lined up for you.
Yeah, awesome.